Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your OBC, your original Boruto Chief Naruto Explained, bringing you guys a pretty big news update when it comes to the world of Naruto, all things Naruto. After many years of waiting with anticipation, we have official confirmation from the Naruto series creator himself, Masashi Kishimoto, that there is finally a brand new Naruto movie hitting theaters for the first time in 11 years, with the last movie being Boruto Naruto the movie, the final theatrical installment of the Naruto franchise. However, there is a catch. This movie is going to be another Naruto movie, but it's going to be because Naruto has finally joined the list of series that have entered into the live action scene, and the director is fine. Let me make that clear right away. He is a massive Naruto fan. You should be excited just off of that alone. But one of the producers attached to the film does give me a bit of reason to be concerned, despite Kishimoto being involved in this movie. Now, just being upfront, if you're a long-term viewer of this channel, you know I don't hate the idea of manga being adapted into live action, and while people will be quick to point out Dragonball Evolution as being the poster child for manga being adapted into live action, I've always said that that is a disingenuous argument, because that would be like saying, since Batman and Robin, which came out in the 90s, had Jim Carrey and Arnold Schwarzenegger and George Clooney in it, and it was a terrible comic book movie, that would be like judging the entire genre based off of that and ignoring the outliers. That take ended up aging badly, because all it took was somebody having a proper budget and a director writing the script who actually understands the source material, and a producer who is a both fan as well as a creative mind. Lo and behold, the fantastical world of printed comics ended up making a splash on the big screen once Hollywood figured out how to make those movies serious in tone and not treat them as campy Saturday morning cartoons. Manga being adapted into live action, particularly with a Hollywood budget, there's been a rough stretch, but the tide has been turning on the medium overall. For those who were cursed by the Dragonball Evolution thing and you still want to bring that argument up, before we get into the Naruto stuff, I want to address why that movie was so bad. Because if you're going to make that argument, it better be an informed one. Fox tried to make a Dragon Ball movie on a budget smaller than the budget that Deadpool 1 had. Deadpool 1 was shot on a budget of $50 million. Dragon Ball Evolution was shot on less than $30 million. The only reason we got the few things that were accurate in it was because James Marsters, who played Piccolo, was a big fan of Dragon Ball, and he fought for those changes. And that movie did so much bad, the guy had to record his lines for Dragon Ball Super's anime dub. And if I remember correctly, didn't even charge, just as a give back to fans. I remember reading the writer of that film after it was being released. He admitted that he did not know the source material, that he had no passion for Dragon Ball, and that he took the job because he needed the cash and only skimmed through the manga before writing the script, and admitted he, quote, dropped the Dragon Ball. This isn't the case here. Destin Credden is a massive fan of Naruto, and he's the one doing the script and directing. That is what you want. When you look at the history of any manga that have been made into live action, the ones that have actually turned out well have had 2 out of the 3 things in common, and for the S-tier adaptations, they've had all 3 in common. Either had the series creator directly involved, and not just as the mandatory, we're going to credit you because we're using your IP. They were written and directed by someone who knew the source material, and most importantly, they both had the budget to actually do the content justice. That's why the Dragon Ball Evolution concerns, they are grossly misplaced. And I want to take this a step further just to show you how big of a Naruto fan this guy is. You do understand that he did such a good enough job with Shang-Chi that he was offered to direct an Avengers movie. He turned it down because he had other projects that were going to conflict with that. That being the Wonder Man TV series on Disney Plus, as well as the Naruto project. Think about that for a moment. An Avengers movie is a walking billion-dollar franchise. Shang-Chi 2 is in development hell right now because of how far behind Disney is. You're basically picking Naruto and another passion project of Wonder Man over the chance to direct the Avengers movie. That's the whole reason why we got the Russo brothers instead of him, because we have 2 out of 3, potentially 3 out of 3, depending on what gets revealed when the movie gets closer towards release in regards to the budget, which that will not be made known until shareholders are looped in and trades like Deadline and Variety and Hollywood Reporter are looped in on what the budget is. Kishimoto was already announced years ago as having been involved in this, but it took it a step further, showing that he met with the director for the movie in order to discuss everything. That is a big deal. Right away, that puts you in the S tier category of Nobuhiro Watsuki and Eiichiro Oda, both of whom were very hands-on with the live action adaptations of their manga. Watsuki took it a step further. He co-wrote the scripts for all 5 Kenshin movies, which were a massive success in Japan, and he was on set every day for the filming. The director was a fan of the manga, and multiple actors were also fans of the manga as well. That is why you can feel the soul of the characters in the live action. With One Piece, Oda was on set, handpicked the cast, weighed in on the story, and gave new information as well. So any deviations from the manga in both of those cases, they were signed on by the series corrector. Given Watsuki and Oda are close with Masashi Kishimoto, and given Kishimoto's photo, it's not crazy to assume he's doing the same thing just because of what the other two did. The Japanese live action Death Note did relatively well as well. I can't recall off the top of my head if the mangaka was involved, but I do remember reading that the director and the producer of that Japanese live action Death Note were huge fans, which I'm not talking about the Netflix version. That never happened. When you look at manga that got live action adaptations, familiarity with the product is key. The S tier for live action manga are the 5 Kenshin movies, the Japanese version of Death Note, which again, not the Netflix version, and the Netflix version of One Piece. A tier manga being adapted to live action would be The Blade of the Immortal, Alita Battle Angel, especially Parasite if you're into the horror stuff. B tier would be Yu Yu Hakusho, since it kept the tone of the story, but it is very divisive due to there are a lot of changes that were made. And C tier would be Bleach and Gintama. F tier would be Dragon Ball Evolution, Netflix presents Death Note, Cowboy Bebop, Attack on Titan, Full Metal Alchemist. Those films are war crimes, and if you want to torture somebody, you should play those films back to back for them. I'm not worried about Destin Cretton because he has a very deep bag and he knows how to tell both character-driven stories that are very highly rooted in emotion as well as handle action. Most of you will know him from Shang-Chi, which also had a ton of anime references in it as well. One of the characters literally performs Kamehameha in that scene. Or you'll know him as being the person that is directing the upcoming Spider-Man movie. But if you really want to see his vision, and if you really want to see the depths of what his pen game looks like, then I recommend watching Just Mercy, which starred Mike B. Jordan, and it's based on a true story. Glass Castle is another good one because it goes deep into the mind and emotions and deals with things like abuse. The same with Wonder Man, which is majorly slept on. It's on Disney Plus. It is Emmy nominated for a reason. It's a very emotional story, and legend has it, Naruto is a story that has a lot of emotions in it. Now, before I go into the concerns I have with the producer, I want to address 2 things that I've been seeing a bunch of people saying online. Some people are already going, but how are you going to do Madara dropping a meteor in the Naruto movie? So they're already jumping to Shippuden era stuff, and people are expecting a one-to-one retelling of the story. When you do a movie, it is an adaptation. For those of you guys who are still in school, you've probably been warned by your teacher that the movie isn't the same as the book whenever you got to do a book report. It covers key points, but there are changes made. Case in point, I will know within 5 minutes of talking to somebody if they only watch the Harry Potter movies or if they've only ever watched the Game of Thrones stuff and they've never read any of the books. The same with talking comics. I can usually spot somebody who is a MCU only casual fan versus somebody that reads comics. The Naruto movie is going to be an adaptation, not a one-to-one retelling. Changes you are going to see are likely going to be either suggested by Kishimoto or signed on by Kishimoto. No different than the Kenshin movie making changes to that, or the One Piece live action doing things like having Sabo show up a lot sooner than he was originally supposed to, or having Buggy play a bigger role in season 1 than he did for the sections of the manga that they adapted. So the press release showed Naruto Volume 2. That is very important. That is an indication that they're going to be doing an adaptation of the Land of Ways arc, and that is doable. You're basically covering 3.5 volumes because almost half of Volume 4 is the start of the Chunin exams. You don't really need a massive budget for something like that. The most CGI that you will need if you stick to the manga continuity is the water dragon jutsu scene and the scene when Naruto crashes out on Haku. And if you're going to add in that anime scene that starts the story off with the Nine Tails destroying the village, which in the manga, it just opens up with the narrator speaking, and then you get the cover page, and then you get Naruto painting the Hokage monument. Even if you add in the Kurama scene, you can still shoot this on 100 million to 130 million, and there's more than enough there to adapt 3.5 volumes of story into a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, again with some changes. Most importantly, and this is the big thing that people don't talk about when discussing film, where you shoot matters. If you shoot in Japan, there are massive tax breaks that exceed what used to get offered by multiple states here in the United States, and they also exceed what places like Scotland and Australia do, which is why DC and Marvel shoot over in places like Scotland and Australia and the UK. Japan literally eats 50% of your production costs. So say you spend $150 million to make this film with all the CGI and reshoots and etc., you're only on the hook for $75 million for production. That lowers the box office number needed to break even or even to turn a profit. Even when accounting for marketing, that lowers what you need. If this does well, you do what Kenshin did with movies 2 through 5 and what One Piece did with season 2 onward. You up the budget for the sequel. However, my primary concern, the only concern I have, is that I'm not a huge fan of the producer, which is Avi Arad. If you are a fan of Marvel and you know his history, you know exactly why I'm not a huge fan. For every brilliant idea, and he's had brilliant ideas, like say in Spider-Verse 2, making the Spot be the villain, he was also, and this is sarcasm, he was also the brilliant mind who thought for Spider-Man 3, oh, that's a nice script, but Sam Raimi, let's also introduce Venom into the story because that'll sell more toys. Because he was also the CEO for Marvel Toys, so he had a lot of incentive back then, even though Raimi had no plans to use Venom. The same with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, having a jumble of villains from the Green Goblin to Electro to setting up the Sinister Six. The Morbius movie was him, the Kraven the Hunter movie was him. If I'm not mistaken, so too was Madam Web. Also the Venom movies, which those were a diminishing return. However, to give him his flowers, without him, the MCU never happens, because he was the one who got Marvel Studios the rights to use characters like Iron Man, Captain America, to B-list characters at the time. And he also brokered the deal to get them their only A-list character at the time, which was the Hulk, because due to bankruptcy, Marvel didn't own the rights to those characters. So he is a mixed bag. Case in point, Blade Trinity was a clusterfuck, but it had moments of brilliance. So again, he is a mixed bag. So I do want to make this clear. While I am worried about the producer a little bit, that is negated by the fact that the director writing the script is a huge fan, and Masashi Kishimoto is directly involved. That's enough for me to go into this with a very open mind. Again, Avi Arad is not terrible. He's had hits and misses, but again, Kishimoto being involved and the director being a hardcore fan is enough to make me happy to go see it and support it. I know some people, and you're probably one of them, don't love the idea of manga being adapted, just like there are comic book fans who do not love that comics get adapted into live action. But when it's done with respect to the source material and it has a good budget, it can and it has worked. Not just comics, also again, live action manga. And most importantly, and the biggest thing, that is how you grow a fan base for a medium beyond just the hardcore fans. If you grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s, nobody was dressing up as Iron Man. You go out now for Halloween, you see all these little kids in Iron Man and Black Panther and Captain America costumes. You didn't see none of that shit until the MCU happened. That is what you want. Personally, I root for manga adaptations because I prefer the medium over comics. And I strongly feel, if handled correctly, for as big as comic book movies have done, if you give manga that treatment with the Hollywood budget and most importantly, people that know and respect and are fans of the source material, you got a multi-billion-dollar industry that will make whatever comics have done during the golden age of comic book movies look like child's play.